Substack moves on Hollywood with top Marvel DC writers targeted. This is coming from The Hollywood Reporter. The San Francisco-based newsletter platform plans to spend north of $30 million. Now, I knew they were spending a lot, but that's more than I thought. $30 million to entice big comic writers to leave publishers, artists as well, and let them keep the rights to their own intellectual property when they create characters and they publish their own comics. Quote, they're paying for names. This is coming from The Hollywood Reporter. I'm Adam Post, publisher of more than 1,000 independent comics. Let's talk about this article. Before we do, subscribe to the channel, click the bell for notifications so you get more stories like this. On August 9th, a shot across the bow was fired at DC Comics at star Batman writer James Tynion, leaving his longtime publishing home at WarnerMedia, DC Comics, for the upstart newsletter platform Substack Pro. This is like Image Comics all over again, with money up front. To hear Tynion tell it, which he did on Substack, the writer had a choice: sign a new 3-year exclusive contract with DC, or contract with the San Francisco-based platform. Quote, I remember sending it to my lawyer and asking if it could be real because it was exactly the kind of offer he was dreaming of. This happens every now and then. Every now and then there is a boom in different things. When PayPal was trying to really build up their company, they were offering $5 and $10 bonuses for everyone who you referred to sign up for PayPal. They were trying to create a viral thing, a network effect. It worked for PayPal. Sources tell The Hollywood Reporter that Tynion nabbed around $500,000 for an upfront fee. Importantly, Substack making no claim to the intellectual property created during that time, meaning in addition to the revenue split on a $7 a month subscription fee, Tynion holds the right to sell intellectual property to studios for future film or TV adaptations. His first comic for Substack, Blue Book, begins later in September. So he keeps the rights to his work. Substack will help him build an audience, plus he has his own audience, so they just kind of merge together. They're making a deal. That deal may spark a paradigm shift for top creators who work at major comic firms like studio-owned Marvel and DC, known within the industry as the Big Two, as well as those at mid-level publishers. Just as Substack's lucrative offers to top journalists invited a new wave of media pros at outlets like New York Times or Vox Media to become independent operators and decamp for upfront payments to start subscription-based newsletters. That was Glenn Greenwald. That was Alex Bergeron, I believe his name is. A number of people who were also getting excluded from mass media because they had unpopular ideas. Substack brought them over. They're getting their word out and they're making money. Hollywood may be the next target for Substack. So this is the Hollywood Reporter. They're thinking for film and TV, right? The venture capital funded newsletter platform is investing heavily in enlisting creators for its push into original comic books. The one source is pegging the figure north of $30 million over the next few years. So can Substack really spend $30 million on creating new comic book content, even if it doesn't get the money back from subscription revenues? The answer is yes, and easily. Internet companies make long-term investments. Does it matter to them if they make money back right away? And even if they have a stream of revenue that's like, all right, well, they spend $30 million and now they're making back, $2 or $3 million that they're splitting with creators. That's enough that if they get momentum, they've now created a new platform for digital comics, and it will generate some revenue, and that's enough for them. And if they spent $30 million and they just started generating $3 million a year, they could always cut back on additional spending and then keep that revenue, like the subscription services like Netflix. In the wake of Tynion's move, several other creators have signed with Substack, including John Hickman, the author who reinvigorated Marvel's X-Men line in 2019, and Justice League and Iron Man Nowhere writer Scott Snyder, who signed a Substack Pro deal to launch an online comics writing class. Substack's initiative is headed by Nick Spencer, a longtime writer who's worked on such titles as Spider-Man and Captain America, and who's leading the outreach after joining the comic line in June. So pretty much it seems like everything's going through Nick Spencer. Quote, better than doing research, he has actively lived the experience of a comics creator and fully understands the perspective and needs of his peers in the industry, Substack co-creator co-founder Hamish McKenzie said of Spencer in an email. So, good for Spencer. He's got himself a good deal there. Substack is part of a wave of platforms, including Amazon-owned Comixology, that are seeking to create comics for the digital age as the medium is booming. In 2020, graphic novel and comic sales in North America totaled $1.28 billion, up 6% year over year, per industry analyst Milton Greep, who used to have Capital City Distributors, and John Jackson Miller, who runs Comic-Con, which tracks comic sales. I've been looking into comic sales recently in direct market outlets, and they're actually not bad. They're not bad. There are some things that are doing relatively well. Definitely the comic industry is in a bunch of trouble. They've lost a lot of enthusiasm because of all the social agenda stuff in comics now. But comic stores are selling comics. Now, can you produce comics and just sell them in comic stores? Some people are, probably not. But it's potentially another outlet for crowdfunded books. On Substack Pro, digital is also growing. It's growing substantially. I know a licensed kids publisher who does graphic novels, and he was telling me, particularly during the pandemic, sales just took off and they haven't stopped. And it's finally becoming a substantial part of their revenue, like 20+%. Let's just put it that way. On Substack Pro, top creators receive a one-time upfront payment, that sounds good, from the company with no expectation of output, beyond the publication of a set number of newsletters available only to paying subscribers. That's a pretty good deal. So Substack takes 85% of all revenues generated by the paid subscriptions, leaving the remaining amount to the creators. At the end of 1 year, that split essentially reverses, with Substack getting 10% of generated revenue and creators receiving 90%. Most enticingly, whatever intellectual property is created, the creators get to keep. So what's interesting and not talked about is, would Substack be uncomfortable with print versions, let's say, of crowdfunded books being sold on Indiegogo or Kickstarter while they were also released through Substack? That should be negotiated. I don't know. I don't know if anyone's talking to them about that. Sounds like somebody ought to, though, because it would serve Substack's purposes to get a name comics creator, without dropping any names, whoever, somebody popular, bring their audience to Substack as stuff was put out digitally that was also repurposed for print sale. I don't know if it's digital exclusive or not. They don't seem to say. That offer may prove appealing for some. People work at Marvel and DC because they love the characters and want the exposure. Absolutely true. Says one insider, adding the top talent can both make well into the six figures. That's true too. Very rare, but it does happen. This source, however, concedes that Substack money is becoming the writer equivalent of Netflix dough to creatives when the streamer initially courted Hollywood's top talent extravagantly as it jumped into programming. They have deep pockets, says another source. A comics creator who was approached by Substack, noting they are paying for names. So, if you get a name, why would they do that? Well, as far as Substack, necessarily no good comics, bad comics, whatever, they're not thinking of that. If you're proven because you've worked for a big name company and your name equals fans that you have right now, not necessarily fans from, 20 or 30 years ago, but if you have fans right now through a big name company, they're interested in you helping them promote Substack. As long as you're tight with Nick Spencer, probably. I don't know if there's a way around Nick Spencer if you're not. While Marvel and DC may choose to counteroffer and keep their top talent with new deals, Substack's new offers may impact the mid-level publishers like Image Comics, Dark Horse, and Boom Studios, Vault or Aftershock, home to titles like The Walking Dead, right? There's really little chance that somebody would say, all right, I'll take another, $10,000 or $50,000 a year from Marvel versus Substack. If Substack wants them, they're going to Substack. And also, the freedom that somebody would have going to Substack is similar to the freedom of crowdfunding. It's just that, $500,000 up front. Not that they're giving that to everybody, but it just depends on popularity. That's a lot of money. This window with Substack will exist for a time. If it's very successful for Substack, if they're able to produce a platform where they get people there to the site, and it builds Substack as a comics destination like Comixology has, for example, and it's substantial. It is a proof of concept for them to do more, like they're saying here, potentially film and TV projects. Why not? Which makes them very viable. The other thing they can do, and they probably will, is cross-promote. So, if they've got one creator at Substack who's doing a popular comic, they'll introduce other creators' Substacks and get additional revenue and exposure that way. So it's an interesting business deal. These publishers publishers try to nurture talent and both give up incomers and established writers a place to create original properties, which they get scooped up by Hollywood. Some of these publishers rely on studio option money and producer fees. They may have their own dedicated divisions to handle adaptations. There's a lot of people trying to make comics for film and TV. But being able to just make comics for the sake of making great comics, even if you can only initially distribute them digitally, if you're getting paid, it's a pretty attractive deal. One executive at a comics company commenting on Substack's lucrative move into the space warns, this is a message to publishers. Justify your existence. Meaning to say, you can say you're a publisher, but you need to add more to the equation than you're just taking someone else's content and making money off of it and controlling it. Because people can self-publish through crowdfunding. They can self-publish through Substack if that's a real option. Now, the other thing is, I'm sure anyone can start a Substack. I started a Substack. I'm not using it yet, but anyone can start a Substack. So and you can have an account, I believe, where if you want to, you can charge for that Substack, same way you can charge for Patreon. So there's really no barrier to entry. So yeah, people do need to think, if they're publishers, like, how do they fit in with what this is? And as a creator, what's your opportunity with this? If you don't have a big following, your opportunity is limited. But I think everyone's starting to understand now, your personal popularity as a human being and as a creator is incredibly relevant to being able to produce content now. You can't just get all your relevance from a publisher or from some other media. However, another executive thinks that any death knell is premature. Not everyone can be a Tynion. True, says one mid-tier comics executive who believes creators will discover that running everything on their own is not easy. Of course it's not easy, but it's incredibly lucrative. Many observers, however, agree that companies will have to find ways to lock down talent in ways they haven't thought of before, either getting poached by, how are publishers going to lock down content? Well, they lost a lot of that opportunity. One of the ways that you would lock down talent is by having a strong editorial brand. By when you bought Marvel Comics, it would stand for something. And it did in the 1980s. And then a lot of people who know me know that I'm a huge fan of Jim Shooter's editorial approach of making sure that it meant something to say you were producing a universe. There was continuity. There were style standards. And your characters, would exist. And your characters would be... they would mean something. You wouldn't change them, wildly. And they also wouldn't be presented wildly and differently, so drastically differently by writers and artists. Tell me what you think about that in the comments below. What's a publisher supposed to do? Is it even worth it for a creator to think of working for a publisher anymore, except maybe just for exposure? That would include Amazon's digital comics platform, Comixology, which has been publishing original content since 2018. Comixology's business model, which allows readers to purchase individual comics in addition to subscribing to a monthly service that provides access to a curated reading list, is more traditional than Substack's approach. Yeah, because you're just buying individual comics, and you can subscribe as well and get access to more of a library. With Comixology acting as both a retailer and a publisher. Quote, we see the benefit of making a long-term investment with creators, especially those creating exciting and challenging work in multiple genres. Great content always resonates, and we're betting on the future, says Comixology head of content Chip Mosher. A clear benefit for investing in original comics content is a synergistic one for Amazon, with its studios division developing 2 Comixology titles for Prime Video Youth and the All-Nighter. Okay, you know, who knows? Who knows what that is? Meanwhile, Substack's business, aside from the lucrative upfront payments, may resemble a new twist on a reader revenue model in place on a platform that has been home to comics creators for many years, Kickstarter or Indiegogo. To date, now Kickstarter in 2021 supposedly raised $18.6 million for comics creators on 1,253 projects. That's not a lot of money per project. Comicsgate recently, between 2021, just broke 10 million just on Comicsgate books. That's incredibly impressive. So, you know, supposedly that approach, however, may be open to well-known creators with a sophisticated crowdfunding strategy that leverages strong audience support from a devoted fan base. Notes Kickstarter director of publishing. I guess they're paying attention to Comicsgate and Comics Outreach, Oriana Leckert. I know nothing about her. While Substack may begin to make noise in Hollywood, there's no guarantee that the format of newsletter comics will be embraced. It's digital comics. You know, how much content is going to be in that newsletter? I mean, you could subscribe. There are free versions of these. It depends how much is in that digital comic. You know, it's partly why I was thinking about a digital strategy when I published College of the Dead and the Mermaids. The idea was, you know, with College of the Dead, for example, this was designed as a 6-panel grid originally, and then it was published as in College of the Dead Book 1, I published them 2 panels per page. In College of the Dead Graduation Day, we published it as 6 panels per page. In color, College of the Dead Book 1 was black and white. But the idea being that this was years before Substack and all that, but people can share JPEGs. You know, you could share these as individual panels and get people a little bit interested in the story if you formatted it this way. It was an experiment. And the story's great. The art is great. I love how these came out. Of course, they're still available. With the Mermaids, it was produced similarly with 6-panel grid, and then amazing Chris Renkowitz, known as Renkobot, redesigned this more dynamically. So when we published the sequential art comic, and this comic is in print and has already shipped, and I'm really, really excited that this book came out. So much work and so many years of getting it done. But of course, other publishers come along, Techno Comics, and those were the guys who actually backed the Sci-Fi Channel. So they made out pretty well with the Sci-Fi Channel, even though Techno Comics didn't really work. Cross-Gen Comics didn't work. Millions Lost. Virgin Comics from Richard Branson, and some other guys who were Gotham Entertainment out of India. But in any event, Virgin Comics didn't work. And they had the strategy as well of paying off big talent and trying to attract big talent. You know, it is tough to publish comics. You know, some of you guys who listen to this, these videos do publish your own comics. Tell me what you think of the Substack approach. Are you considering a Substack strategy? Maybe we should start looking at that a little bit more and start thinking about it for individual creators. Because the truth of it is if they're going to spend $30 million to bring content and bring audiences, those are eyeballs that are interested in comics, that are interested in individual creators, that if Substack helps at all to cross-promote, and they will. They're not saying they will. I'm telling you they absolutely will. Why? Because it creates a network effect. It's like Facebook and Facebook friends, like, you know, having connections with other people and looking at other similar content is something that all these media platforms do. So they need more content to do that. I'm going to look at this more seriously and do more videos about it in the future. Tell me what you think in the comments below about Substack and what they're doing about crowdfunding. Anything that's interesting that's related to this. Love to see your comments. I reply to everyone. I will see you again soon with another... Oh, almost forgot to tell you. Of course, I publish my own books. EpicMermaids.com. You can check out The Mermaids if you haven't seen it already. And College of the Dead, where college costs you an arm and a leg. CollegeoftheDead.com. You can see a link for that as well in the description. All right, I'll see you again soon with another video. And if I don't see you, I will miss you.